we're looking at a growth in the sector of renewable energy by the end of this decade with a factor of tenfold. So there's a lot of change coming in. We are also, of course, changing the environment as producing the turbine is no longer such an interesting topic in itself. It's very much also integrating renewable energy into the grid, into other energy sources, into storage. So a lot of new partnerships, a lot of new structures is coming into our landscape that we need to understand how do we actually work with suppliers, and our business model is very much changing. Similarly, we're also having a lot of requirements into solutions from within our own internal customers. And of course, there's a lot of expectations coming in, and we have seen a rise in the understanding of needing to invest in technology. So we are investing more or less doubling every other year the investment into IT across the entire enterprise. So that gives a lot of obligation to prove that we are actually generating value back from all these great investments. And that's sometimes a little bit of a challenge, and I'd like to dwell a little bit on that. I think you all seen these, and this is a portfolio view, and this is very much what's driving sort of the investment planning that we do. We go to our senior executive, we have some value propositions, we have some complexity assessments, we have some probability of the value. We are always very, very impressed by the business cases and the outcomes that we can envision. So we have a return on invested capital that is above the 50%. So we have a return on investment for investing in IT. The promise is we can do that within 18 months in average, 22 months, sort of in between that section. It's super attractive. We're up to our neck in business cases at the point of promising what to do. So when the product owners or the project managers or the portfolio owners or the business developers, they come in, it's hardly ever a question of being able to fund from just looking at the business case. But reality is that maybe our ability to then deliver on this return on investment is not always coming through. And of course, we also work with learnings, fail fast, these kind of things. So of course, it's okay that we fail, but why are we actually failing? And a study here from Sandhill showed that 70% of all deployments of software fails, or when it fails, it's due to poor adaptation. And also you have the IEEE mentioning that about 15 to 20% of all IT investments actually go wrong in the making. And well, if all that is changed into learning, we should start seeing that we learn and then start becoming smarter. But it doesn't really seem like that. It seems like we are stuck into these 15% of wasted investment, and adaptation being around the 70% of the poor implementations generate waste. And that sort of sparked an interest to us to say, well, what is this user adaptation? And we all know that there are projects going very well. There are some characteristics that sort of makes it easier for users to adopt, but we don't really have facts on this. And we certainly do not have a learning loop where from the implementations that we do, we can bring back facts and data on what drives adaptation, and our ability to also perhaps discuss and have a predictability in the beginning to say, is this actually likely to be adopted by the user? Do we see patterns from the use cases or the architecture or the software that we deploy that this will actually most likely be well adopted? What sort of change do we need to drive in our investments? So it's not all technology driving this, but it's also the change of people and processes to make this work. That got us a little bit into the thinking mode, because when I look into what we invest, we lose just by the adaptation at least around about 20 or 25 million euros of investments in IT every single year. And maybe a bit of this is learning, so okay, give and take a half. It's still a ton of money that we are wasting, and we're wasting it in a repetitive manner. It's year on year, every single year we have this lost. And that's of course frustrating. What also bothers us is a little bit our ability to solve problems. And the University of Virginia have this nice video, and I recommend you to go in. It's a 6-minute video, and it gives people a box of Lego, and I saw Lego here, so it's a very nice setting. It gives them this unstable bridge and a few more Lego bricks. And without further ado, people are then asked to make the bridge more stable. And 90% of all participants add to the bridge, add more bricks to the bridge to make it stable. So we have an unconscious bias of really always rushing to adding on. And we also see that when we have problems, we add on more and more. So we need automated testing, we need all the greatest new things. So we add up, and we keep having our technology depth and our problems of poorly adopted systems. We don't really deal with them because it's a hassle and it's not really nice. It's always nicer to add stuff. And that sort of gives me also worry, because what will happen? I mean, we will have so many pockets of poorly adopted solutions, poor data from these solutions that becomes unreliable sources for our next developments coming in play. That if we don't deal with that and put a value onto this technical depth, onto this poor problem solving that we have done, our ability to have a live, kicking, and well-adopted solution and architecture will simply plummet as we put more and more investments into our IT systems. And I think also looking into how we work with systems being able to be available when used, we have sort of a very technology approach to that. We add a lot of surveillance and sort of do a lot of structuring on our architecture on a common structure, but we really have very little insights into what is actually the user patterns of these different applications. Is it going up or is it going down? When are they actually using the system? Can we actually just make it available and reliable when we have usage, and not always, because we always end up asking business, so how would you like your system to be available? Well, obviously 24/7 and super fast and everything, and it's super costly. Maybe we could do things smarter if we have more insights into our service technicians in the field. When are they actually needing digital tools? What about our engineers? What about our people on the installation? What about people in manufacturing, or let alone partners who needs to access systems? Can we get some sensing? Can we get some profiling on these user patterns to start being smarter in making sure that the services are available when they are to be used, and not just available and accessible all times? So it really feels a little bit like flying blindfolded. It really feels like there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of pissed off, ignored users out there who we have very, very hard time to speak to, because we are not really close to them. And it also feels sometimes that we have to provide air cover and support for our Scrum teams and product owners, because they know all better. And if you can just keep management away and make sure that the funding keeps coming, because what we do is absolutely fantastic, and you can see my backlog here, everything is going well, but we are really unable to prove that. We are really unable to prove and predict whether the backlog we have built will generate the money that we promise. At least we are investors. It might be a completely different thing where you are, but that was at least our take. And our ability to speak to management and actually get them to acknowledge and see the value, not just the cost, but the value of IT. We really had to go and get a proxy for value, because understanding all the changes, all the leading and lagging indicators in making a change, there is so many moving parts. But it's very easy to speak a story around adaptation. That quickly resonates even with senior people who have experienced how hard it can be sometimes to adapt new solutions. So we got off starting to learn, and we learned in a couple of projects, a few of them mentioned here. And for both of these projects, and I'll dig a little bit more into them, they are super smart, prize-winning solutions that, it's really state-of-the-art, and they have really been super smashing business cases, very high-profile scenario. It was not like we were trying to sort of save cost or trying not to do the right thing, yet they had very different path of adaptation and very different lives going forward. The first one we call one field service. That's 4 applications. It's targeted to our service technicians out there in the field, and they need to be in the field either doing plant maintenance or predictive maintenance of turbines, because obviously turbines need to spin. They need to spin when the wind is blowing, and especially they need to spin when the wind is blowing and the price of electricity is high. So how do we make sure that we give a tool for our service technician to understand what's the installed base, how's my turbine built, what sort of spare parts is relevant for this service order that I'm going out to service, how do I register my time in an efficient manner? I don't want to bother too much around that. And how do I also make sure that I can act in a safe scenario when doing my inspection? We looked into this, and over the course of the last 10 years, we have been super smart in generating tons of fantastic tools that we have thrown out to these poor service technicians. So when counting and visiting them, we counted more than 40 different applications. Each of them very smart, doing very smart use cases, smart on technology. It was not like it was all crap. It was really nice, but at the end user part of it, they were simply unable to adapt. Furthermore, in our service business, we have a churn of around 18%. So every year we have more or less every fifth service technician is replaced by a new one, because we have a lot of labor churn plus growth of markets. So we're penetrating a lot of new markets here. So also learning all these new tools is a huge obstacle for people to do their work and perform. So looking into how many hours we could save, and also how much motivation from our service technicians we could generate, because when we look at our employee satisfaction survey, they were not really happy about the tools they had for doing their job. They were more or less coming in their way of doing their job. So we generated with perfect scenarios, both on discovery, understanding the user journey, having small prototypes, building up experiences. We had these 4 apps built, and we were quite keen on making sure that we would learn not just how each app was adopted, but also how would we learn inside the app, what functionalities and how are the user traveling each of the applications. And we had also a mindset of knowing that we would probably not hit jackpot first time round, so we had a more of an iterative process into developing the product. On the site planner, we have on our installation business, the crane is really what defines the work going on at site. And the crane is a very expensive piece of equipment. It could easily cost 100,000, 125,000 euros a day to have a big crane to do all the hoisting of materials, etc. So to actually understand and make sure that you had the optimal movement of the crane on site, we provided a back-end supercomputer algorithm that could calculate the absolute best route of the crane depending on the actual wind speed at the tip height of the turbine. So was it the weather actually possible for the crane to hoist the blades or the nacelles to the tower, or should it rather move to the truck and offload truck loads on the ground? How can we also here help safety on the for the site planners and actually communicate back to head office what is actually the work going on at site, so we can optimize the cash flow going for materials going in and out on site, and also make sure that we can make a transparent communication back to our customers. This was very much built in a different mode. This was very much built from a business case and technical viability, but not so much necessarily visiting the user, not necessarily so much really understanding the use cases out there. Although we absolutely tried and thought we had the perfect examples, but when we deployed this, we found out that there was quite a bit of difference across our geographical areas on how installation was actually done. And truth of the matter is that we just looked very simple into the adaptation. So how are users actually using the different apps that we have? And as you can see, we had in the beginning, because of all the bangs and whistles, we have a nice adaptation going on in both scenarios. Even in the simplistic, extra small adaptation framework, we have a pickup of use. For the 4 different apps, we had also a pickup of use, although there was one where we were struggling a bit due to performance and availability of the app. However, as you can see, something happened with the site planner, and we did not have the usage. Whereas the others, we were able to have incremental investment coming in and argue that because we knew what was working with the service techs and what was not. So we were able to drive the adaptation towards the steady state, and that also gives a firming up of the business cases in new investments going into the app, but also in the promises of the business case that were out there. So by simple measures, just by looking into the active log on and log off, plus some feedback on logging from the mobile apps on what the user were doing on the app, we were able to really correlate what's the functionality, what's the use cases that's really driving the value due to the adaptation. Also, we were able to have a completely different dialogue with our senior management. On the site planner, it turned out that we had regions where the management was not really interested in having this kind of planning being done at site. They wanted that to be done back office with planners who could correlate better with the supply chain part. That was not uncovered in the business case, though, by the same people. Whereas when we went into the field service app, we were able to really correlate and have much more investments coming in, even more apps, more roadmaps coming in to say this is really where we can drive the efficiency of the users. So we were able to start ramping down on the site planner. And actually right now we will close the site planner app, even though it was a beauty award-winning program and we have been very proud to have it. We will switch it off because we don't want to have the cost carrying forward of having applications out there that some uses, but not all. We would like, because the cost of running this and developing this simply do not add up to the value generated. Not the same case with the field service app. I think I spoke a little bit into this around the difference on our process, and we can speak more to this if there are questions on how we ended up. But also just like to also give some room for you guys to communicate back and perhaps also have questions. What we did was, after this learning, was to look into, could we do this more at scale, awakening the value of all the sleeping giants we have, because we have tons of installed software. We have tons of solutions out there, and it's not really always sexy to look into whether we should invest in them. But could we do something simple to start having a dialogue of which to sunset and which to invest in? Where should we pivot and where should we persevere? Where should we have value that we could start applying, not by developing new technology, but start using what we already have? And it's super simple. You can do this very, very fast. We just simply looked into the AD, said, okay, how many users are in the AD group that this application is using? And then looked into the application and say, okay, so how many have been logged on? It's as simple as that. It's not hard. But having this, it's a super strong dialogue tool, fact tool with management, because all of a sudden we can have discussions around application lifecycle, so what to sunset, what not to. We can have dialogues around geographical differences in how applications are used. So why on earth are they using it this much in Americas but not in the US? Because if they're using it this much, they must have a higher productivity or a higher efficiency or an output that's supported by the software. And maybe Europe is doing something different, have found a smarter way of doing this. That's actually often what we have, is that some of the corporate enterprise solutions out there perhaps have locally there has been smarter solutions out there that has really made users use a smarter and better tool, but it's not coming back to the headquarter. And for obvious reasons, probably lost in politics and other matters, but all of a sudden we can have dialogue around this. All of a sudden we can start having interesting dialogues also with users out there when they're suggesting new tools and new systems. Well, why aren't you using this? Or are you actually, another thing that we are discussing right now is, what about the data flow in this? Because often we are building solutions where we are relying on data coming from our existing applications into this. It could be simple HR data for logging on, or it could be finance data or other things where you simply just assume and expect that the source systems, the data that you acquire, even though it's decoupled architecture and all the shebang, you expect that the solution is working and it's out there. But we have tons of implementations where it goes very well in one part of the globe, and then we come to another part of the globe, and all of a sudden the assumption that things were working there for things outside of scope were really falling through because we did not have insights into whether the solutions were adopted, whether they were actually acting as expected. And this has been a big sort of game-changing dialogue on how we start looking into how we fund, how we look into continuous investment. And we're also very much interested in finding out, so what are patterns for what drives adoption and what doesn't? What is actually a user-centric architecture? What sort of technology is super duper fancy, but do we really see users picking it up? Is it really something where it's not just a novel technology and it's fancy, but it's also something that users can immediately apply, and we can start having a bang for the buck on this. So that's really where we are interested, and that's what we are trying to do. I would also say a big plea, because it's a little bit intimidating going to GOTO from a manager, right? It's like putting your head into the developer's crocodile mouth and maybe be having your head chewed off because you're the evil smell of management. And I think this is probably also where developers can help. I mean, make sure that you leave small insights into your development so that we can actually pick it up and start talking about the adaptation. I mean, we heard all morning about our brain's inability to understand systems and correlate information and scale. We heard, furthermore, for those of you who joined Simon Clatworth, all about the experience economy and understanding, it's not just whether it's a functioning system, it's also whether it's desirable and whether it's usable. Well, for that, we have to add facts to this. We have to start bringing in facts and data on this so we can bring that to management, not just for funding, but also for learning. What is actually the superior approach to driving change? Because if you remember in the beginning, we have a tsunami coming towards us. If climate change is on the rise, we don't have time to waste 15% of our investment. We don't have time to have software bugs with 70% of the bugs being related to poor adaptation. We don't have the time. We need digital transformations to have a faster pace of changing the world. And for that to happen, we need facts to understand what works and what does not work. And for that to happen, we need to have software that can bring forward that fact as a standard structure. And that's definitely something that I would like to bet my money on if we have that. Yeah, sure.
One field service was on the previous slide.
We set up some threshold here to say we would like to see an increase of 20% adaptation. Because we saw an opportunity to take the one field service applications and put them not within our service and maintenance business, but into our installation business, and some of them regarding time management we could even put into manufacturing. And we are behind on exactly that adaptation. So well spotted, but it's actually it is as simple as that, right? Why isn't it not adopted? That's really the good question, and it sort of takes out technology fully from the dialogue, and I think that's the whole point. But thanks for pulling that floors. All right, we have some ambitions on where we want to go. We talk a lot about just simple user adaptation, and that's probably where we are. Is simply just a heartbeat. Is the user active, or is he or she not? But we would also like to take the word of adoption a little bit further, not just looking into whether the user is adopting it, but also what about data adaptation? With more and more APIs coming in, what's the adaptation of data that we are providing out there? Or what about processes and end-to-end flows? What's the adaptation of a process? A process is certainly, when it comes to billing customers, it's often quite important to make sure that the paycheck is being paid. So understand what's actually the adaptation of our processes. So we're looking into whether we can build a platform Not necessarily to make everything into a tool, because the platform could also be methodology. It could also be new skills and services that we need to bring forward. But how can we actually take adaptation measures and put them into our pattern of how we develop and how we build? So right now we are putting in adaptation measures into all our project governance. So we have all projects have to, when they present their detailed business case, or all products have to, when they bring forward their epics and their user stories, they have to put in structures on how will they measure usage, and what's the target of use case of usage for each of the epics coming through. So put it in the beginning, so it's part of the non-functional design criteria coming into the build. And then we're looking into whether we can start picking up this, and there's actually probably quite a lot of information we can get by monitoring, because we have tons of insight into how our applications and systems and services are used from a monitoring point of view, but it's very technical. We would like to take the same data and transfer it back into value capture. And that's really what this platform part is really all about. And I'm curious as to how far we can bring this, but I'm quite sure that there is a pot of gold into looking into this and making sure that it comes through.